When I was a kid growing up back in the 1960s and 70s, I remember that tipping was one of those things where you would normally tip 10%, maybe 15%, and then if the service was exceptional, then sometimes you'd leave 20%. But it was always based on service. But in recent years, I've noticed, I've mentioned on this channel a couple of times, that at least here in California, almost everywhere you go now, there's a tip jar or a little tip box, or someone requesting a tip, a sign. The last time I was in a hotel, there was a notice saying that a tip would be appreciated for the person cleaning the room. First time I'd ever seen that. And I think most of the convenience stores like 7-Eleven now have little tip boxes or tip jars where you can tip the person, I guess, for ringing up your order. There's almost nowhere you can go anymore where someone's not asking for a tip. And what makes it even worse is not only are they asking for a tip, but they're asking for a lot, a big tip. They're not asking for 10% or 15% anymore. They're asking for 20% and 25% and 30% and 35%. I'm sure at some point they'll be asking for 50%, maybe even 100%. It's gotten completely out of control, in my opinion. And I've just been shocked. I mean, I'm just totally shocked that these businesses have the nerve to ask us, the customers, to pay their employees. I can't think of any other industry where a business is allowed to get away with not paying their employees a living wage, sometimes not even a minimum wage. I have no idea how all that started. From what I've heard from other people around the world, tips are not allowed. Tips are not a thing. Nowhere else in the world that I'm aware of are businesses allowed to not pay their employees or to pay them a very, very tiny amount, and then to let the employee fend for themselves and rely on the kindness of strangers, basically, to give them a tip to pay the rest of their salary. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world that I'm aware of. If I'm wrong, let me know, but I know I've heard from lots of you from countries all over the world that you're as shocked as we are that here in the US, businesses are allowed to do this. So anyway, this is just my opinion, but it just seems to keep getting worse and worse and worse. It almost feels like tips have become just another scam. And so out of the goodness of our hearts and our generosity, and that's what the restaurants are relying on, we continue this tradition of paying the salary of these employees that the restaurants and other businesses are refusing to pay. And this is just my opinion. And when I was younger, I never minded paying a tip. And back then, I mean, you would go out for a meal and it'd be $10. So 20% would be $2. It wasn't a big deal. Now you go out to a restaurant and most of the time it's $100, even just for breakfast. And so you're paying $20 for a tip. To me anyway, it just seems completely wrong on every level. And it has been very controversial whenever I brought this topic up, because there are a certain number of people who have just called me all kinds of names for even daring to talk about this topic. And I'm assuming those people are either servers or restaurant owners. Anyway, so I was just curious how all of you felt about it, if I was alone or if other people agreed with me. And so I posted a poll on this channel recently, and in the poll I asked, has tipping in the US gotten out of control and gone too far? Do you feel pressured, obligated, and required to tip rather than tipping to show your appreciation for good service? Like I say, it used to be based on service. Now it has absolutely nothing to do with service. Everyone just expects you to tip. And another thing that also has recently happened, it's one of those double-edged swords where now your server has, in most restaurants, or a lot of restaurants here in California anyway, has an electronic device. They come to your table and show you your bill, and they take your credit card and you can swipe it right there at the table instead of them taking the credit card away. So in that way, it's a really good idea. But what happens is the very first thing you see when they show you your bill, the very first thing you see is how much do you want to pay for a tip? And they are normally starting with, like, lately I saw 18%, 20%, 35%, 30%. I don't think I've seen 35% yet. But so the server who just served you is holding this here, asking you, how much do you want to tip me? And so most people, my thought was, I think most people are probably going to tip more than they normally would just because they're feeling guilty or embarrassed or whatever. And I was wondering if any of you felt the same way, because I certainly felt that way. I mean, I would still give the same amount of tip, but it does make you feel like you're being pressured. All of a sudden, everybody at the table is looking at you. The server who just served you is looking at you. And how much are you going to tip me? And so that's a lot of pressure, and that shouldn't be put on customers. There should be nothing in there about the tip, or the tip should be the very last thing, like it always is, at the very bottom of your bill. Shouldn't be the very first thing. So they've learned another way to force us to give more of a tip than we might normally give, or to give a tip when we might not want to give a tip. But I also just read in the most recent AARP bulletin, in fact, let me see if I can find that, I'll read that to you. I've got it here. Okay, I just found it. It's an article called Your Brain on Bargains, Why You Should Look Twice at Any Price When You're Shopping. So it was an article about shopping and saving money. And there was just a little sidebar here. Actually, there were 10 tips, I guess, to be aware of when it comes to money. So number 9 is tip screens. It says, when a cashier swivels a screen around for you to pay and choose the tip amount, okay, so this is even just at the counter, a private decision suddenly becomes a public one. In a split second, you battle a flurry of questions. Should I tip? How much? Is that enough? Can other people see it? Will they think I'm cheap? Well, you already know I'm cheap. But I'm actually a very big tipper, but only if it's based on service, not just somebody asking me for a tip. I mean, pretty much, well, not just someone asking me randomly for a tip, which is pretty much everybody these days. As a result, tip amounts are higher on visible devices, according to a new study Calenda cites. Okay, so I was right that it's another way for businesses and servers to get us to pay more because they know we're going to feel embarrassed or pressured or guilty for not giving a larger tip. Isn't that crazy? So have you read this? Do you guys get AARP? Always some really good articles in here. Let me get back to the poll. Has tipping in the U.S. gotten out of control and gone too far? Do you feel pressured, obligated, and required to tip rather than tipping to show your appreciation for good service? A whopping 85% of you said yes, it's out of control. 12% of you said no, and 3% of you said other. So 85% of you feel the same way that I do. It's totally out of control, and for lots of different reasons, and 148 of you left comments. So let me read some of these comments. Avenger Adventures 2012 says, I don't mind tipping at a restaurant or somewhere where I receive good service, but when I'm somewhere that they just did their job, making food, drink, and checked me out, I don't like it when the card reader asks if I want to leave a tip. Also, when I pay with cash, some people just assume I will give them the change. Sometimes I'm getting for someone else, and it's their money and not mine to tip. Also, the rounding up of totals for a charity is getting so out of control. I know, right? At least in my area. Steve KZ says, I went to McDonald's and paid with credit card, and up pops tip options. Hell no. I was thinking the other day, once they get rid of all the cashiers and the servers and everything's done by robots, because I'm sure they could do that now where a robot could just bring your meal. And a robot, I think a lot of places like McDonald's, aren't they trying to use robots to take your order? In fact, a lot of them are using kiosks where they're asking you to place your order yourself instead of going up to the counter where the person could actually take the order like they have in the past. And so are they going to expect us to tip robots too? I bet they will, and by then they'll just automatically include it, I'm sure. What do you think? I mean, I shouldn't be laughing, it's not funny. I mean, this is all pretty awful for the servers and the customers. Not for the restaurants, but definitely for the servers and the customers. Pops Singing says, it has backfired in my area. Restaurants are shutting down and others are begging for people to come eat there. People feel squeezed for money everywhere they go, and they just don't have the money to dine out. Servers are telling people not to eat out if they can't tip, but they are killing the restaurants they work at. Not very smart. This is the law in Florida. The employer must ensure that the combination of the cash wage and the employee's tips equals or exceeds the state's minimum wage. That's how it should be everywhere. I don't think it is everywhere. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's absolutely how it should be. Waitressing in only a minimum wage job, the idea that you should get paid on par with skilled labor is insane. Well, there's some truth to that too. RHV Original says, you have to be alert these days. A lot of places add in gratuity before you even get the check. If you're not paying attention, you may end up tipping twice. DS says, tipping has gone from being the service quality you receive to business requesting it to supplement the wages. Exactly. Because it's asked for on the card machine, it's a no. I don't know if that money gets to the staff or some shady bookkeeper in the back keeping it for the business. Yeah, that's possible too. I agree with the tip idea, helping workers, but I think businesses need to step up and pay staff accordingly. I remember applying for jobs where the pay offer was half the legal minimum wage, but with gratuities you should, in quotes, make more than minimum wage. It sounded way too shady for me. I never took any of the jobs. Ernest Allen says, it used to be in this country that you tipped if you felt you got top-rate service. Now they demand a tip and even tell you how much you have to tip. I don't know why they don't do like Europe and the rest of the world and just include the tip in the total price. But if you get a bad server, he's getting his tip and being rewarded for not doing his job. I thought these 15 to 20 hour wages were supposed to do away with tipping. They want $20 an hour plus a tip. Can you spell entitled? Never made $20 an hour slaving away in a hot factory for 9 hours. Michelle says, as an Australian, our country doesn't rely on tips. We are paid properly. It is never expected to tip. It is completely optional. You will not hear a waiter asking for a tip. You will not see subtotals plus tip on an invoice. Having visited America a few times, the tipping culture is out of control. As an outsider, we don't know how much a tip should be. I had waitresses not doing their job properly, not getting order correct, was not attentive, etc., yet expected the change as a tip, which would have come to a lot more than what is the recommended tip percentage. My sister was chased by a sandwich hand expecting a huge tip. Businesses need to be paying their employees correctly like the rest of the world does. In Australia, we have laws to protect employees. People don't mind paying a bit more in restaurants, etc., if it means the business is paying the employees properly. I totally agree with that. It should not be up to customers to subsidize the wages. I did tip in America for the employees who gave good service and not demanding a certain amount. Scott Maroon says, lower the price of food, you might get better tips. Yeah, that's a good suggestion too. Yeah, I mean, that's the other interesting thing, isn't it? It's like, as prices skyrocket in restaurants, that means the tips are also skyrocketing. So customers are really being squeezed. Shalila rhymes with Delilah says, I hate mandatory tipping. Tips should be made optional for good service. Some places that I refuse to patronize have tip amounts that run more than the product being delivered. Gerald the Sea Lion says, the companies need to pay their staff a proper wage, not the customers. Do you tip supermarket workers, bin men? No, yet they provide a service. When you're paying $200 and you're expected to pay a $40 tip, it's madness. Sure is, Gerald. Lawyer Calhoun says, tipping at a sandwich shop like Subway or Jersey Mike's seems ridiculous. You go in, order your sandwich, they make it, and you pay for it. Where is the extra good service? Seems the only possibility is for poor service. Will they soon be looking for tips at Burger King, Wendy's, and McDonald's? Yeah, I'm sure they will be. I bet they already do. Let us know if you've seen that. Or at the supermarket checkout counter? Yeah, I'm sure that's next too. Specrazi says, hi Steve, I only tip those who are actually serving me physically. Waiters, waitresses, car wash detailers, etc. Those who just sit at a cash register and take my order do not receive a tip from me. I do not feel bad or guilty in any way. I'm not a walking ATM. Exactly. Though last week I did tip a young man at a well-known home hardware store $20 to load a 60-pound room air conditioner into my car. Those kind of tips only happen once or twice a year. I'm happy to tip on those out of the ordinary occasions when I really need help. He did not want to accept the money, but I insisted he take it. Yeah, I'm with you, Smekrazzi. Those are the kind of tips you want to give when someone goes out of the way to help you, especially if it's not required or necessary for them to do that, but they, out of the goodness of their heart, or they're just good workers, or in situations where stores are really so helpful, they help older people who maybe are not able to lift their bags and take them to their cars. I've heard that happening. In those cases, yeah, I mean, that's a really nice thing to do. And I'm all for giving as much as you can to someone like that. They totally deserve it. And whenever I know someone's making minimum wage and they go out of their way to help me, I give them way above any amount that would be recommended for a tip. But that's rare because it just rarely happens when anyone does that, or when you need that, kind of service or help. But those are the kind of tips that you actually want to give, and they make you feel good to give because you know you've given it to somebody who actually needs it and could use it and probably appreciates it, rather than just because their employer won't pay them a living wage. But I have a feeling most people feel that way too. Berserkly says, I admit that I am very frugal, but I used to eat out at least once a week at a sit-down restaurant, but now I might eat out once a month. In Silicon Valley, not only do you have a tip, but some restaurants also have a service charge. I will seldom tip over 10%. We also need to discuss the outrageous price for non-alcoholic drinks. $4, $5 for a soda or coffee. I usually get water. Restaurants in my area are shutting down every day. Yeah, a service charge. So far I haven't run into that. I can't even imagine what that's all about. Theater Buddy says, why are we subsidizing this industry? Very good question, Theater Buddy. And why have we been doing it for decades now? E-Money says, tipping needs to go. Imagine paying someone extra to do a job they already get paid for. Dwayne says, the last time I went through the drive-thru at the Starbucks, I used my debit card and the cashier asked how much I was going to tip. I know, it's like, I don't know, it's laughable, it's so ridiculous. And again, one of these days, that's going to be a robot at the Starbucks window asking you how much you want to tip. Or maybe demanding it if you want your coffee. Catherine says, even in Canada, it's bad. Really? Okay, I didn't know that. Ernest Allen says, I resent some of the commenters saying I don't have the right to eat in a sit-down restaurant if I can't afford a big tip. I will eat where I want, when I want. All right, Ernest. Retired Sock Monkey says, I wish we would eliminate tipping like other countries. Me too, Sock Monkey. It should have been eliminated decades ago. Dana Wildman says, I was at a concert, went to buy a t-shirt. They asked my size, turned around and got it. Didn't have to take one step. And when I went to swipe my card, it asked me what % tip I wanted to leave. I am usually a generous tipper, but not for a 30-second transaction. Yeah, just another example of the insanity. Janice Zalewski says, why can't we just pay people in the service industry a living wage? It should not be up to us to subsidize someone's income because their company thinks it's okay to pay them substandard wages. Awesome Gen X says, I never leave a tip. If the server is making minimum wage and wants more money, then look for a higher paying job. Not going to shell out extra money for somebody to serve me my meal because that's what they're getting paid to do. Bixby69 says, hello Steve, I believe it's the 7-Eleven in Palm Springs. There's a tip jar on the counter where you check out. Yeah, I've seen them everywhere. Bill Shaver says, tipping is not found in most other countries because their system pays the staff a fair wage for their labor. Here we allow businesses to use the excuse that they cannot survive if they paid more. Then perhaps they need to rethink their business model. Why can many businesses, big and small, be able to pay well and still make huge profits while others opt to make huge profits at the expense of labor? Very good point, Bill. So I think those were some of the most interesting comments, and some of those I hadn't really thought about before. So very good comments. Always learn things, new things from your comments. So thank you all for taking the time to leave your comments and for taking the poll and sharing with us. And I'm happy to know that it's not just me, because I remember that first video when I first went into a pizza shop and they asked me for a tip because I was picking up my pizza. I was like, what in the heck? I mean, I was like, I couldn't believe it. And I left a comment about it, and I got a lot of negative responses saying what a cheapskate I was, and I should be happy to be paying these people handing me my pizza a large 20% tip. I mean, so I thought, well, is it just me? And if it is, oh well, I'll be on my own with this. But it's not just me. It's 85% of you also agree it's out of control. So I'm sorry if I didn't get to your comment, but thank you. I read them all, and I appreciate them all. And maybe I'll read your comment on the next one. But I didn't want this video to be too long, and I already know that it's going to be much longer than I was expecting it to be, but I just wanted to share as many of the comments with you as I could. So thanks again, everybody, and I'll hope to see you all in the next video.